Welcome to Urban Education, Issues and Solutions. Our guests today are very special. We have Raymond and Maggie Gonzales from Prince William County, Virginia, who are our local heroes who entered the national history story related to school desegregation. The series this year is focusing on the Brown v. Board of Education decision, the U.S. Supreme Court decision in 1954 to end racial segregation in public schools. You have a story, Runyon v. McCrary, that went to the Supreme Court that has a really interesting connection to the Brown story. So I'll start with you, Raymond, to sort of tell a little bit about your family background, how you came to this area, and the story of Runyon v. McCrary.
We migrated from, Trinidad and Tobago in 1967, and we were in New York for a while, but Maggie was working here in Virginia, so eventually my son and I moved here, and we lived in Falls Church, and he was at the age where he was too young for first grade in public school, so we looked around for school where he can attend kindergarten, and there was a school within walking distance from where we lived. It's the Fairfax-Brewster School. I visited the school and with intention of enrolling him. I met the teacher who would have been his teacher, and she showed me around the class and says this is where he would, this is where his class would be, and so on. I filled out the application, and I was told, well, you would hear from us. So I went back home, and within a few hours of my visiting the school, I got a call from the school, and there's a gentleman who identified himself as the principal, and I felt that, well, the principal is calling, everything is okay. And he said, listen, we cannot enroll your son at the school because we do not accept black children. And those were exact words. It's not the response I expected. So I paused for a few seconds and I said, don't you know the times that you're living? You're saying that, you don't accept black children. He said, those are the rules of the school. And I ended the conversation, and so my thinking was, what do I do next? So I looked up the phone book and I called the Department of Education in Washington, and I told them exactly what happened. And their response was, this is a private school. They do not accept federal funds. And as a result, they have, the choice of, admitting who they want in their school. Since this was the federal government that was responding to what I was asking, I accepted what I was told. And we eventually got our son enrolled in another school, not too far away, and he started school. Until months after, we were in contact with some friends in the neighborhood who also had a son. And, but we didn't know what was happening until she started to tell me the story of her son He was enrolled at Fairfax-Brewster, and he was actually enrolled in the school and attended class. But this was a mixed couple. The wife was white and the husband was black. Now the wife took the child to school, and the child looks white, and he was accepted. The afternoon at the end of the school day to pick the child up, who could go to pick the child up was the dad, and they saw that the dad wasn't white, and they literally threw the kid out. And so, I mean, they were really devastated, over the story. So we happened to be talking, and she was telling, the wife was telling my wife exactly what happened. And my wife turned around and said, listen, that's exactly what happened to our son. And she said, what? Listen, this is what we wanted to find out, because we wanted to find another child that was discriminated in this particular school.
So this is Mrs. McCrary.
Sandy McCrary.
Sandy McCrary. And she worked where now?
I believe she worked with the Office of Civil Rights in Washington. And so she's sharing this story with me, and I'm telling her exactly what our experience was. And so she says, I certainly couldn't be working in the office that I am working in to just let this sit. And she spoke with, I suppose, some of her co-workers at her office, and a lawyer from that office got in touch with us. And Raymond, I believe, spoke with that lawyer. This was Allison Brown was his name. And Raymond can share some more about that.
Yes, well, he called me, and I told him what the incident was about, and he said, this is good, because we needed another family to back up the McCrarys. He said, well, we are going to be filing a suit against the school, and are you prepared to be part of the suit? So he said, you don't have to answer me right away, but let me know as soon as you can. So my wife and I discussed it, and so she said, well, if you want to go ahead, you go ahead. I will stay in the background.
Because you had another child too at the time.
Yes,
you had a daughter.
So,
right.
So I contacted the lawyer, and he said, okay, that's fine. You would be contacted to give a deposition, which took place in Fairfax. So I went in and I gave the deposition, and based on what I told them, there was enough of a case to proceed with the suit. So the trial was held in the federal court in Alexandria. Judge Bryant was presiding. But in the meantime, many of the schools in the South that, as a result of Brown versus Education, there were a lot of private schools. And in hearing about the suit, they joined in the suit. So it was hundreds of schools from the South that was part of the suit. So the trial became much bigger than how it started. And I was put on the stand, and I was grilled with all kinds of questions in terms of, you are a foreigner. Because we weren't citizens of the United States. We were legal residents.
Permanent residents.
And we weren't even here yet. And there you are, trying to change the law of the land of the United States.
How dare you?
Right? How dare me? Right? So, I know I held my ground in terms of what he was trying to get me to say, but I told him exactly what happened. And then Mrs. McCrary, she was next on the stand, and she gave her side of the story. Judge Bryant, so the trial ended, and he needed, a few days to make a decision. The decision was in our favor, because it was all over the news, because it was since all the schools participated, and a lot of the well-known lawyers were part of it. The school immediately appealed.
Right.
And it went to the appeals court in Richmond. Now that took some months, and the appeals court ruled in our favor. The school said, okay, well, we're gonna do what we have to do, and we're gonna file a suit to go to the Supreme Court, which it ended up in the Supreme Court, and we had the privilege of being there at the Supreme Court at the hearing. Justice Thurgood Marshall was there, and
he was newly appointed to the court.
Yeah,
at that
he
point.
was. Yeah, he was
and
relatively
it was
new.
interesting to see the procedure where each side is given like 20 minutes or half hour to state their case, and the judges can interrupt by asking questions and so on. And so it was quite an experience for us. So the hearing took place in the Supreme Court. Of course, they take many months before a decision is handed down, and eventually, when it did, the decision was unanimous in our favor. It made the headlines, Time Magazine, New York Times, and NBC interviewed us, right? So it was a national news, and
on what grounds did you win the case? Because these were private schools. They perceived themselves to have the right to be able to deny whomever they chose, even if they could pay the tuition. So on what grounds were you able to win the case?
Well, there was a clause, the equal protection clause. That was what the defense, our lawyer, that's the direction he went. And the court agreed with him that these two children were not given equal protection. It had nothing to do with being a citizen or resident. They enrolled in the school, and by denying them that, you didn't offer them equal protection. So
they didn't have equal access to high quality education,
right.
And parental choice,
right.
Even though it was a private school. What was that like for you? You were new to the Commonwealth of Virginia, relatively new to the United States, and here you find yourself on the front page of newspapers and in front of NBC, having won a Supreme Court case.
That was an extraordinary experience, because here we had begun all of this with the simple idea that we were trying to get our son into school, and having had to make other decisions, and then to be part of this extraordinary set of events. It was more than I could have imagined.
You haven't told this story very often. We, I think, discovered you when we were putting together a symposium to look at the 60th anniversary of the Brown v. Board of Education decision. And Dr. Shelley Wong here at George Mason said, we have a local story right here that's very similar.
That's right.
Why is it that more people don't know your story? Is it because you're just modest about it and you'd rather...
I think so, because it was funny. in the street I lived in, on the day the decision was handed out, and all the studios, had the TV trucks on the street. People wanted to know what was happening, and because I never discussed it with my neighbors, this was something we did on our own. Even on my job, I worked with United Airlines then, and they didn't. So they would say, "Hey, I saw you on TV. I didn't know all this was going on." I said, it was something that we do. It wasn't done for the publicity or for any other reason than that we were trying to right a wrong, and that's how it is. But we. Of course, after a few days and it was no longer in the news, life went on, and we didn't, it wasn't talked about, but we had our day in the sun for
a moment in the sun.
So not only did you transform all schooling for kids of color, all kids, so now all public and private schools are intended to be available to all children, and access to high quality education is supposed to be part of the law of the land. But there are also some parallels in your story to some contemporary issues. When we look at undocumented students now who are, through the DREAM Act, advocating for access to high quality education, access to in-state tuition at universities, access to K-12 public schooling without fear of deportation. There's a similarity in that they're sort of daring to speak out, knowing that they are perceived as not belonging in this country, and how dare you ask for rights and access to the public till or access to equal protection under the law. Do you see parallels between your story and that story?
Very much
well, to a certain degree, but with the DREAM Act, I guess it's asking the public to support educating these children who are here illegally, using my taxpayers' dollars to support them, and where they shouldn't be here in the first place. But most of these kids, either came here when they were very small, or some of them were born here. Their parents, even though illegal, but most of them were tax-paying, members of society. But still, to some people, it was difficult for them to swallow that they're here illegal, and that's what, that's a big issue. But I think, with us, it was a little different in that we weren't here illegally, but we were new to the country. We weren't citizens, and we were challenging the law, the law of the land. But I can sympathize with the Spanish-speaking, population that's part of the DREAM Act, that they're here, and to being able to get an education, it's it's part of being here.
And actually, there are immigrant groups from all over the world, not just Spanish-speaking countries,
exactly,
that are also part of the advocating for the DREAM Act.
Right, DREAM Act, yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. What can you say to contemporary parents, whether they're documented or not, whether they have access to a lawyer or not, who want to advocate on behalf of their kids for access to high-quality education? What thoughts, now that your kids are adults and now you have grandchildren, what advice would you give?
Well, I would. It's different now, because there are a lot of groups that are quick to, if you think that there is a problem, that they're ready to advocate for you. in our case, this was a daring that literally never happened before, because we were challenged, and now it's a lot easier because the discrimination in public schools and then in private schools, that's gone. This is a question of educating children who, through no fault of their own, are here, and why deny them the right to an education? And there are a lot of groups and there are a lot of lawyers who would be happy to advocate for these people. So it's a lot easier, now than then. Yeah.
Does it always take lawyers? You're a retiree from the College of Education and Human Development here at George Mason, and so you've seen education from a different vantage point.
Exactly.
And so can you give some advice or thoughts about not just for people who are struggling to get in, but struggling to stay, for example, or other things from your experience?
I believe that parents, particularly, for their children, there is such an innate passion that I am responsible for this individual's education, and regardless of whatever might be the situation before me, I'm going to fight with every fiber of my being, to push those boundaries and let that individual receive all that is possible for them. And I think that is what drives these situations, whether it is at the early childhood level, the grade school level, even at the college level, where parents right now are struggling with dealing with the financial demands of a college education. Do you just not acknowledge that deep belief that I'm going to do everything that is possible for my child?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So equal protection under the law is what allowed you to win your lawsuit, the Supreme Court case. Equal access to high-quality education is what the Brown decision intended to advance. The Commonwealth of Virginia fought very hard, starting in 1950, well, before 1954, but especially in 1954, massive resistance to the desegregation of schools, massive resistance to the desegregation of private schools. Do you see that the Commonwealth is in a better place now? Do you see more space, more official institutional openness to all kids getting access to education?
I think so. I can speak for, here in Prince William County and Fairfax County, it's a rarity to hear of any incidents where a child was denied entrance to school because of their status. So I must say some good came out of the attempt we made at fighting the discrimination in private schools, and then with Brown versus education in public schools. So the playing field is pretty much level now. There might be incidents here and there, but I think overall it has served well, in the Commonwealth.
Or at least more, more level than it was.
Yeah, right. Certainly. Yeah.
Any final words?
That looking back to where we were more than 40 years ago, it's been an extraordinary journey. It's been a really, really extraordinary journey.
Any final words from you, Raymond?
I'm proud that I was able to do a small part in making a change in the system, and we're here today to see the fruits of it. And if I had to do it all over again, I certainly would. And we thank the system for understanding where we came from and what we are trying to do, and it has worked well for everyone. Yes.
Many, many people are inspired by your story, and I'm so happy we had the opportunity to share it today, and I hope it can serve as a beacon for other parents that are struggling to figure out how to afford their children access to high-quality education. Maggie and Raymond, I thank you so very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for this
And
opportunity.
thank you for your courage. Thank you for your courage.
Thank you.
You've been watching Urban Education, Issues and Solutions. Thank you for joining us today.